What's up everybody, Chris here bringing you another travel tips video. This one coming to you from my recent trip to Patagonia, South Chile, Torres del Paine National Park. Awesome location, amazing landscapes. I'm gonna be talking about locations, lodging, places to eat, weather, anything that a photographer traveling to that area would need to know. So let's dive right in. So I want to start off with a quick disclaimer. The park is pretty large. There is part of it that is accessible by road, so you can definitely drive around it. But the actual area where the mountains are, there is pretty much only hiking trails out there, which there is one main trail known as the W, and then there is the circuit, which is an O-shaped trail where you walk around pretty much the entire mountain range. I personally did not hike. I wasn't there for many days. I didn't really camp. I would suggest to somebody, if you have more time at the location, if you really want the true experience of Torres del Paine National Park, definitely hike and camp out there. There's some other reasons why I mentioned that it's a good idea, but definitely you can explore just the different aspects and not the regular angles that a average person might get. Pricing for the entrance fee of the park is about $30 for non-citizens, about $9 for citizens. I happen to be a Chilean citizen, so we paid the cheaper price. And the way it works is you get to enter and leave the park for 3 days. So if you're staying outside in Puerto Natales or something, you can drive in and out only for 3 days, and after that you can't come back in. So if you think about it logistically, on your last day, it might make sense to camp out and stay there, or if you are camping there to begin with, you can stay in for as long as you want because they're not going to kick you out after 3 days. So moving on from that, we're going to start out with our locations. So the most prominent location in Torres del Paine National Park is, of course, Los Cuernos, which means horns. It's a mountain with two peaks rising out, which kind of resemble horns, hence the name Los Cuernos. Now, given the fact that it's such a large park and there's so many bodies of water, there are many locations from which you can view the Cuernos and the other mountain peaks that we have. The two that I recommend, the two that I visited, are the Sendero Mirador Cuernos, which is a 1 hour, 45-minute-ish walk from the parking spot. And on the way there, you run into a waterfall known as Salto Grande, which is a little bonus spot. It's a waterfall decently sized. Depending on the lighting, it might be better for a late sunset or a sunrise. I was only there for sunset as we were on our way to the lookout spot for the Cuernos. There's a lookout area and you can actually hike down a little bit and get a little bit closer. Watch out for the spray, which is typical when you're shooting waterfalls. When you get out to the end of the trail, the hiking trail, you'll have this nice lake, and depending on how windy it is, you might be able to pull off a long exposure to smooth it out. You'll get probably as close as you can get to the Cuernos without maybe hiking to the bottom of the actual mountain. I used a branch. There were scattered branches all around. I dragged one sort of into the water, put on my ND filter, and shot a long exposure. The second viewpoint of the Cuernos, and actually the entire mountain range, which is Paine Grande, Cuernos, and you see a little bit of the Torres in the back, was actually at Hotel Explora, one of the pricier hotels that is in the park itself, of which there are a few, and these hotels have some amazing views out the window. I didn't stay out there, but you can just tell that it is up there in price ranges. There's a wooden path that leads up to the hotel, and you can get a lookout from there, but we chose to walk down, and there's a couple of small lakes which offer like a perfect reflection. You know, you get the whole mountain range there. You almost don't even have to do a long exposure unless it's really windy, which when we were there, it wasn't too windy. And great for astrophotography. Check out this astro shot that I took. I shot a blue hour foreground shot, and then I composited in the sky afterwards, left my camera there. We went out like at 1 a.m. You can see almost every single star in the sky. There's just no light pollution. It was really amazing. But anyways, when we were out there, we had perfect conditions as far as what I've seen on most vlogs and travel videos. It would have been nice to have some clouds, especially for the time lapses, and to have some texture in the sky. We unfortunately or fortunately had zero clouds. So you got the nice alpine glow. The time lapses showed the mountain range being lit up by that orange golden light slowly as the sun rose. It was just an amazing experience. Depending on the time of day, the different locations will serve you in different ways. So, you know, hopefully you have time out there to scout it out. Depending what time of year, the sun will hit it in different ways. I personally hit the Hotel Explora spot for sunset, and then we actually camped out there overnight, shot astro, and then shot the sunrise in the morning. So we got some amazing shots. The second spot I want to mention, which unfortunately we weren't able to visit, hence why I'm giving you the tips as to when you should go there, was when somebody thinks of Torres del Paine National Park, they usually think of that shot with the lake and the 3 mountains there called the Torres. The trail is called Mirador Base Torres, and the tricky thing about this is that it opens at 8 and closes at 6. So you won't exactly be there, depending on the time of year, you won't exactly be able to be there for sunrise or sunset unless you are camping in the park. Hence why I go back to recommending, if you have the time and you're comfortable with it, definitely camp out there, because you won't be as regulated by the park rules. You can just wake up and hike up there whenever you want. But basically it opens at 8. It's about a 3 or 4 hour hike from what I was told. So like I said, unless you camp nearby, you're not really going to get the sunrise. Also, you will not be able to enter the base camp from which you hike up to the Torres after about 1 p.m. I think we arrived around 1-ish, maybe even 12, and we were turned away because of the 3 to 4 hour hike time to reach the top, hiking up, hiking back down in the dark. They kind of want to regulate that, make sure no one gets hurt. So definitely, if you're driving in, get there at 8 a.m., get there as early as possible, or camp out there. And of course, you'll get that iconic shot, which unfortunately I wasn't able to get, but that's why you plan ahead and you watch videos like this to not make the same mistakes as I did. Another cool spot worth visiting is called Cascada Rio Paine, which is just a large waterfall, quite comparable to some of the things you'll see in Iceland, not in height, but it's pretty wide and there's a lot of water. It's tricky to get a good shot there. There is obviously the crowds and tour buses that pull up. You can get close to the water's edge, but not low enough. You might pull something off at a sunset or sunrise. We arrived there late afternoon, not really late enough for any color to be in the sky, but it's still kind of tricky to get a composition out there. Part of it is blocked off. You can get close to the water's edge a little further up the river, but then you're looking down, so you don't actually have the water coming at you. Nice spot to take a little snap or an Instagram post, maybe shoot some video, but a little tricky there. I didn't have any success getting a good photo composition. I will offer an alternative. Actually, on the way to that waterfall, we mistaken a smaller waterfall, but still pretty cool. Next to the road, small hike down. It's unmarked, but it's a well-hiked trail, so it's one of those things where you're not really sure if it's part of something that you're allowed to do or not, but either way, there is a small hiking trail. It goes down to the edge of this cliff. There is a waterfall down there. You can actually hike further down depending how comfortable you are on these kind of steep rocks. But you can get down close to the water, you can get a shot there. A quick mention that I want to bring up is a small lagoon lake called Laguna Amarga, which is technically outside of the park. It's a cool spot to get a view of the mountain range. I can't exactly remember which mountain you see. You definitely don't see the Cuernos, but you see the side of probably the Torres or another part of the mountain range. And depending on how windy it is, it was quite windy. I tried setting up a time lapse, but the wind was blowing salt spray into my camera, so none of them really pulled off. But you can get a cool shot there if it's not very windy. Also in the vicinity, there is a lot of the native animals, the guanacos specifically, which are a llama type animal, which are actually all over the park, but they kind of congregate there maybe because of the water or just because it's away from the road. And you can get some cool wildlife shots if that's what you're into. When we were there, actually, there were also some flamingos, surprisingly, in the water. It was very unusual to see a flamingo there, since when I think of flamingo, I think of more tropical kind of environments, but I've actually seen flamingos in Atacama as well, in the middle of salt plain, in the middle of nowhere. So I guess they're kind of typical to these harsh, cold regions. Another location that we visited was Laguna Grey, which is named after the glacier, which is called Glacier Grey. And there's actually a hotel nearby, which I will bring up when I'm talking about food locations. But you basically pull up to the parking lot. There's a short hike across a cool little bridge, rope bridge over a river. a little bit more hiking, and I would say it's about 45 minutes to an hour depending on your speed. You'll get to the water's edge where there's a lot of little icebergs that have broken off from the glacier and drifted down. The icebergs break off even smaller and they wash up on the shore, kind of a la Diamond Beach, Iceland style. There is also a small path you can walk up, small little hiking trail, probably about 15-20 minutes, and you get to another lookout, and you will see pretty much the whole lake area with the icebergs there and the glacier in the distance. An additional tip that I want to bring up is there actually is a ferry that'll take you out to the glacier. Unfortunately, the price for that ferry is about $120. It's a short trip out there. You're not really going to be getting close to the ground or anything. So I personally did not think it was worth the money. However, there are hiking trails which are part of the circuit and probably part of the W, which take you right to the edge of the glacier, and you can get definitely better shots because you're going to be on the ground. You can get lower, you can find some leading lines, and you can definitely get better shots from the hiking trails. Moving on, this brings us to lodging. So like I said, there are a lot of hotels in the park. Surprisingly, there is some really high-end luxury. The Hotel Explora, like I mentioned before, the Hotel Lago Grey, which is a nice spot. So definitely luxury options if it is your thing. There are also a bunch of campgrounds, road accessible and hiking campgrounds further up where all the hiking trails are. High season is from October till about February, March. It's a little bit warmer, so you get the bigger crowds, and of course everything is super booked. So if you're gonna stay at the campgrounds, definitely book in advance, probably months, especially if you're going there in high season. Your other options are to stay at the closest big city, which is Puerto Natales. That's where we stayed. There's Airbnb we stayed at. There's a bunch of hostels from every price range. Everything's pretty decently priced because it's so far away and it's a small town. It's about an hour and a half to 2 hour drive depending on what part of the park you're going to, because there's an east entrance, south entrance, and there's tour buses that leave from there, which brings me to my next tip, which is transportation. So there are the tours that you can take, which take you to every part of the park accessible by road. I think they add on a hiking package to that. Not sure about the prices, but I saw plenty of places advertising it. We personally rented a car and drove out there just because I like the flexibility of arriving at whatever time I need to, staying as long as we need to. One of the nights we actually camped out in the car. It's not exactly allowed, I believe, but as long as you're in the parking lot of one of the camping grounds, nobody's really going to bother you about it. I wouldn't recommend you break the rules or the law, but it is an option. That's actually how we got sunset, astro, and sunrise all in the same trip up there. Otherwise, you're going to be driving 2 hours, an hour and a half before sunrise, might even be like 3 or 4 in the morning. So yeah, in some cases it is easier to stay out there. I know there are these camper vans, Wicked Campers. I've heard about them from other vlogs and other travel videos, and they seem pretty cool. You can just park out in the campgrounds. You don't have to have a tent or any of that, so that's another option. So moving on, we come to food options, restaurants. There are restaurants part of the fancy hotels in the park, obviously. The only one that we actually ate at was Hotel Lago Grey, which is right by Glacier Grey, as the name suggests. Excellent breakfast buffet. That was actually the morning after we camped out in the car. I believe it was about $15, which is pretty cheap considering how expensive it is to stay at the hotel itself. Excellent food, that's the one I would recommend. We were actually turned away at a couple of spots. I won't really mention the names, partially because I forgot, partially because I don't want to badmouth anybody, but they were basically empty restaurants, and we were told that it was full, maybe the accommodations, maybe the people staying there, and so they were holding out for all the guests. Some of the campgrounds have small cafeterias or little snack stores. You can get small little bits. You can obviously bring in your own food, especially if you're driving. Just bring a cooler or however you want to deal with it, and warm up food if you need to, and just do it the cheap traveler way, which is kind of the way I like to do things. As far as weather goes, I'm not really the expert on what it normally is like. From what I've seen in other vlogs and travel videos, it was really crappy weather, a lot of clouds, even obscuring the mountains, and a lot of the photographers that I saw weren't able to get any good shots. We had the opposite problem where there were no clouds, so I wasn't able to shoot many time lapses. There were wisps of clouds that disappeared as soon as I started my time lapse. It was kind of frustrating. And I had so many opportunities to get different vantage points of the mountains, which would have been perfect with a little bit of clouds going over, but unfortunately we had none. I composited in a few on my photos, admittedly. I'm not really ashamed about tweaking compositions a little bit, you know, not exaggerating and putting like an epic sunset or sunset clouds over it, but just making it look a little bit better. So be wary of the time of year that you go. In the summer, I would assume that there is less clouds. We were there beginning of November, which is the beginning of south of the equator summer. Maybe you would want to go at the end or earlier before summer, so you can get some kind of texture in the sky, because it's kind of frustrating when you have excellent conditions and the perfect lighting, but your sky is just a plain blue or just a flat gradient. It really does not make for the best photos. I hear it's actually very windy up there, usually, and also from what I've seen from other travel vlogs. I personally did not experience that much wind, not like Iceland by any means, but it's also something to take into consideration as far as clothing. So definitely bring your 10, your 15 stop ND filter if you want to get those epic compositions with the mountains and the glassy water and whatever foreground element you choose to find there. So that is a wrap for this travel tips video. Hope you got something good out of it. I really recommend visiting Patagonia. It seems to be one of the untrending locations at the moment, since everybody's really going for that European, Iceland, those cold destinations. It's a little bit more untouched. You won't see as much info out there. I personally did not find that many videos regarding what to expect. So I would strongly recommend it. It's a great destination for photographers, for hikers, anybody who loves the outdoors. I'll put links to my travel video and the travel vlog so you get the behind the scenes feel. And until the next travel tips video, I will see you then.